Hey all, Mason Mennenga here. The Bible is clear about one thing, and it isn't homosexuality. It's taking care of immigrants. There are at least 4 times more verses talking about taking care of immigrants than there are about homosexuality, and about 20 times more than there are about donkey genitals. Ranging from the very beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis to the very end of the Bible in the book of Revelation, there are many verses talking about taking care of immigrants. And Jesus and his family even left their homeland for refuge. So there is nothing the Bible is more clear about than taking care of immigrants. So today I'll be talking about why the Bible is clear about taking care of immigrants and why it matters for Christians today. Before we jump in, be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications, and let me know what you think about the video in the comments. Also, these videos take a lot of time and energy to make, so if you like my content, be sure to support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Mason Mennenga. And if you enjoy my Twitter account, you can get a shirt or sticker of your favorite tweet of mine at masonmennenga.com/store. There are many verses about taking care of immigrants throughout the Bible. In fact, there are too many to do in a short video, so I want to highlight a few notable ones before I talk about why taking care of immigrants matters to Christians today. The biblical message of taking care of immigrants starts in Genesis 23:4. Abraham, the guy who had many sons, and I am one of them, and so are you, right arm, right foot, left foot. Anyways, in that verse, he says, I am a stranger and an alien residing among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, so that I may bury my dead out of my sight. In this passage, Abraham's wife Sarah died, and they were immigrants in the land of Canaan. So in the verse, Abraham asks to bury his dead wife in this foreign land, which highlights that even the father of the Hebrew people himself was a foreigner, an immigrant. And fortunately, the Hittites weren't evangelical Christians, so they were gracious and allowed Abraham to bury his wife there. The second verse about taking care of immigrants comes just one chapter after one of the most famous verses about homosexuality in Leviticus 19. God tells Moses this law: the foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. In this verse, God alludes to when the Israelites were enslaved in the foreign land of Egypt. Or if you grew up an atheist, you may know it as DreamWorks' Prince of Egypt. The laws in chapters 17 through 26 in Leviticus are all a part of the holiness code, and treating foreigners as themselves as commanded by God is one of them. So while many Christians believe that the law about homosexuality in Leviticus 18 still applies literally, strangely, they don't seem to take the law in chapter 19 about caring for immigrants all that literally. Funny how that works. So those are a couple of notable verses about caring for immigrants in the Old Testament. But there are also some notable ones in the New Testament as well. In the first gospel, the book of Matthew, Jesus shares a parable about sheep and goats. He talks about how he will separate people from one another like shepherds separate sheep and goats, because everyone knows sheep can't be around LeBron James. He then explains how people will be separated by saying, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. He then goes on to say, those who are righteous will ask, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and gave you something to drink, and so on and so forth. And Jesus replies, whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. So even Jesus sees himself as someone who was a stranger to a foreign land. And those who are righteous are the ones who not only invite the stranger Jesus, but the ones who invite and care for other strangers into their homes and land. One of the other notable Bible verses about caring for immigrants comes from the Gospel of Calvinists, the book of Romans. In chapter 12, Paul says, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality. There are 2 interesting things in this verse here. First is the word philoxenius, which basically translates to show hospitality to strangers. The word also appears in Hebrews, and while in Hebrews this word is often translated as to show hospitality to strangers, for some reason in Romans, the to strangers part is often not translated. So in most translations in Romans, it just says hospitality. So it would be best to translate this verse as contribute to the needs of the saints and show hospitality to strangers. So even in the Gospel of Calvinism, there is an encouragement to care for strangers, foreigners, or as we may call them, Immigrants. Although Calvinists may have Thomas Jefferson that verse. The last verse about caring for immigrants that I want to mention comes all the way at the end in the Bible, in Revelation 21. The second to last chapter of the Bible, the author of Revelation describes a vision of the new heaven and new earth that very surprisingly is nothing like in Left Behind. The author hears a voice from this new place that says, "Look! God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." The author of Revelation's apocalyptic vision of the world ends with a world in which God and the people will be with one another. And this will bring about the peace and justice that God and the world long for. While this verse is not explicitly about caring for immigrants, it highlights the biblical message of God being with the people of the world and bringing about justice and peace where the world becomes as it should be. That is the kind of world that cares for strangers and foreigners, and where there are no more Left Behind books. So those are just a few of the many verses in the Bible about caring for immigrants. But there are so many arguments I often hear from some Christians when I tell them that one of the clearest things in the Bible is to care for immigrants. One of the arguments I often hear from some Christians is that the Bible doesn't talk about caring for illegal immigrants. But the thing is, the Bible doesn't qualify whether you should care for legal or illegal immigrants. It says nothing about the legal status of someone and whether that legal status would have any effect on whether you should take care of them or not. The other thing is that many of these Christians who claim we should care for legal immigrants neither care for legal immigrants nor make immigration easier. In fact, almost 70% of white evangelicals say they have no responsibility to care for refugees. 70%! So these Christians don't care about whether someone is a legal immigrant or not, if they don't even think they have any responsibility to care for refugees especially. These are the same Christians who also don't make the immigration process any easier because they consistently support policies that make immigration more difficult. So while they seem to imply that they would care about legal immigrants, their actions show otherwise. Another argument I often hear from some Christians, especially in America, about caring for immigrants is that immigrants are taking over in the United States. Most of these Christians who are concerned about immigrants taking over America are especially concerned that America is becoming less and less Christian. The irony is that most of these Christians concerned about immigrants taking over are white, and it is white Christianity in particular that is quickly declining in America. And it is immigrants coming to America who are mostly Christian. So if these white Christians were actually concerned about America becoming less and less Christian, then they would support immigration to America. However, they aren't truly concerned about Christianity, broadly speaking, declining in America. They are concerned about white Christianity in America declining. They are just white supremacists if you peel back their argument enough. So if the Bible is clear about taking care of immigrants, then that should shape the way Christians live in the world. There are many ways you can care for immigrants in your community. One way is to encourage your church to become a sanctuary church. A sanctuary church is a church who uses their religious status to protect people who are facing deportation. There is federal policy that avoids making arrests in places they deem sensitive, including churches. Although it would have been funny to see John MacArthur get arrested as he preached about some nonsense about predestination because he wouldn't close his church during COVID. Sanctuary in a church can help an undocumented immigrant have the time to get the proper legal guidance and help they need. Another easy way to care for immigrants as a Christian is to simply find organizations in your community that help immigrants. Immigration is a very complex and exhaustive process. There is obviously financial support needed, but there are also other parts of the immigration process like finding stable housing, jobs, learning laws, learning English, and learning the new culture. So get involved with a local organization and use your gifts to take care of immigrants, because the Bible is clear. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and also tell me what you thought about it in the comments. This video is brought to you by my Patreon producers. If you'd like to become a Patreon producer, you can find more at patreon.com/Mason Mennenga.